This is the everything bubble that we've been warning people about for nearly 2 years now, coming out of the cycle lows for all of the markets, the stock markets, real estate, Bitcoin. Everything has been seeing an explosive gain to the upside. It starts out slow and then builds and builds and builds. And what we're seeing right now is a mass entry of new faces. I guess we could say it's not a mass yet, but we're starting to see those new faces come in and they're expecting even bigger gains. Let us remind you that these lows happened when most were expecting a further collapse, a big recession out there. The likes of Elon Musk were also expecting a major recession. He thought this was going to last until now in 2024. This is the most wealthy person in the world, on the planet, thinking there was a recession, and they were absolutely wrong on that call. This was the cycle low. So what we're doing in this video is looking at how these markets have progressed, what you can do about that now, and hopefully not lose all of those profits. And if you have gotten in around about now or recently, how you can make the most of it and not get destroyed in the markets. This is the biggest thing. Everyone is thinking about these huge gains to the upside. But as you'll come to see, these are probably some of the most scary times. The best times are at the bottom when everyone is scared. The worst times are when the market is running out. I hate to start it like this, but I want you to succeed in these markets. The majority of people will not succeed. That's just a pure fact. And now you can start to see how this happens. It happens from some of the smartest people, the most wealthy people in the world still cannot see how these cycles unfold over a long period of time. They are stuck in bear case scenarios until it's too late, until those peaks. Remember where you're at. This is your home of macro cycle analysis. We've been here through the bulls and the bears and the bottoms, and now back up into the bulls. So if there's anyone who is extremely bullish on the market when the market is at the right time, I guess I'm one of those people. Now, this isn't to dunk on anyone because I want everyone to succeed. I just want you to see the cycle and hopefully use it to your own advantage. Like and subscribe to the content. Links in the top of the video description, which you'll check out later on. TIA Premium, of course. But let's kick it off with the interest rates and just looking at the economy. This has come up a couple of times now. Good friend here, Ben Cowan, talking about interest rates here. I'm currently thinking 2 cuts, potentially 1 for 2024. You might have remembered that we talked about this previously on the channel. It's important to note that this particular chart here looked like it was going to have a cut every single Fed meeting throughout 2024. And since that point, it's basically scaled back the other way. There's been less cuts looking like they're going to happen throughout 2024. And at the time, we specifically talked about the possibility of the markets continuing up, no matter if we get a pause, no matter if we get interest rate cuts, no matter if we get interest rate rises. And I know this goes against basically the entire grain of what people believe happens in these markets. This is that stage of the 18.6 year or 18 to 20 year cycle where we're in this everything bubble and things go crazy. Things don't make sense. What was logical back at the bottoms is not logical now. And essentially most people get it absolutely wrong when it comes to the economy. The markets are going up and they're going up in a big, hard, disgusting way. So right now, a lot of people are talking about these interest rates, that they don't think there's going to be as many cuts now. We are looking at March coming up in a couple of weeks' time where there's not going to be a cut. Remember, they were thinking there was going to be a cut in January. They thought there was going to be a cut in March. Now, it doesn't even look like there's going to be a cut in May, and maybe the first one comes in June and then pauses again in July. Maybe a cut in September. I mean, all of this stuff can change at any time, and maybe we only see 1 or 2 cuts like the Fed is saying here throughout 2024. Why? Well, we're expecting the markets to be very strong. And if the markets are strong, they're trying to take the heat out of these markets. And by cutting rates, probably won't take the heat out of the market. I'm not saying that we won't get any cuts, but it's probably not the best thing to do to be cutting rates and allowing more into the markets when they're already going up in a very hard and fast way. This was all part of what we've been looking at for the last several years now on the channel. I've even got videos going back to 2018, looking at the move to the upside, the move down, and then all the way back up at this point. So moving forward, so we don't get destroyed out of these positions, just keep following the chart. And what we've seen as well in the past is when you get to the election time, so we have 2020 right here. It's coming out of a very, very big move to the upside after a very big collapse, mind you, okay? So we've got to think about that. But your election is here in the green, and the market basically paused from that peak there in early September. So September, October is 2 months, and sure, you've got some pretty wild swings here, single digits, about 9 or 10%, getting into the doubles there. But essentially, the market didn't go anywhere leading into that election, about 2 months out. It had a nice big move up from mid-August to September, put in a new high, correction, tried again, correction, and then got going after the election. That's 2020. What about 2016? 2016, here is the election right here on the day that it was, the day that it happened there. We're looking at the market run up here into August again, a little bit of a peak here in September, correction, run up again, correction. Then we get the market going on from that point. So it really sort of stalled out, I would say from July. You got a peak here in August, so similar to 2020. And then we had a correction from that point. The market had been running up from February, one correction here, then back to the top. What about 2012's election? All right, let's have a look at 2012. Here is your election there in November. Here is your peak in September. There's another one here in August, run up, but then it had a correction into the election. And then after that election, we get that running up. So you're starting to get the gist of potentially what might happen. It looks very different on all three occasions. This occasion here, you've got a bigger move up and a bigger correction there. So in terms of percentage, about 8.7%. So that is similar to what happened in 2020. There is your top there. There is the bottom there, about 11%. And then also in 2016, here is your top here at about 2200 to that freak bottom there at 7%. And so really, it's kind of all the same. I thought it'd be a bit different, but it's really all the same there, around 8 to 10-ish%. And so what if these markets do keep running up through summer, and then we finally get that stalling, waiting for that election to happen? Maybe this can happen for Bitcoin. And I'm going to get to that on the charts as well, as we look at this left versus right translated cycle and the possibility of it all ending earlier and it just to collapse from that point. If there's a recession 2 years before a president up for re-election, then they tend to lose. If no recession, they tend to win. So in fact, accurate every time since the last false signal with Calvin Coolidge 100 years ago. So we had Biden 2 years ago. There wasn't a recession in 2022. I know most think that there was a recession. There wasn't. No recession called. Looking at this, almost 100% hit rate that it seems like Biden would be up for re-election and would get re-elected according to this. Let's see what happens. Just an interesting one to have a look at here. As for Bitcoin, we are seeing the inflows and outflows of the ETF not having an exact representation on the chart of BTC. So I'm going to get in nice and tight here on the BTC chart. This is a day that there was a negative inflow, so essentially an outflow, $140 million here. That was Friday. Following Monday, we had 562, then we had 648. So 2 big days there. On the second biggest day that the inflows have ever seen, we got this huge 10K flash crash. So basically, yesterday we saw this thing go absolutely bananas, hit a new all-time high, then big crash, nice rebound so far, nothing yet confirmed for a breakout to the upside, except a nice close above the 50% level. So this is all sort of starting to mount a good attack to the upside again. So this was like a nice liquidity flush. But just looking at these outflows, I really just want to bring strong attention to a lot of people who are getting extremely excited at these times in the market, in this euphoria and thrill and belief. Essentially, we go through these in different time frames where you'll see it on the short term, like we've just seen, hitting up to 69,200. People are in this extreme euphoria and thrill, expecting that these markets will never come back down and just go on and on forever. But of course, this isn't how it happens. And why I mentioned at the beginning of the video, just looking at these lows, if you've been in these markets for a while now, watching the channel, maybe watching other people that are talking about the bottom coming in, and it takes some time, going back from June 2022, so nearly 2 years ago now, looking at the first drop down to 17.5, where we thought that this could be a very good opportunity for a price point for a low, but the timing still need a little bit longer. That was a really good area. And so what we're seeing now at the top is a lot of excitement, a lot of optimism, like this thing can't go down. They start to talk about the ETF, that there's just so much getting bought up off exchanges and OTC desks, and the ETFs are buying absolutely everything. But when you just look at the numbers, 140 million outflow on Friday, and you've got a green day, and then you have the weekend, and then the market pumps up, and then you get the collapse from that point. I mean, you could say maybe it's a day or two behind, but the point of this here is to not base all of your analysis off what the inflows and outflows are doing. Continue to watch the chart. Otherwise, you could get very much destroyed. We're seeing it right here. You had a negative day. If you had a negative day, wouldn't the market go down because they're selling all the Bitcoin? Maybe they're going to sell it tomorrow. Maybe they're going to sell it the next day because it was a weekend and the market went up from there. So we'll just keep following the chart for further indications of strength and weakness in the market, as opposed to just listening to the hype, because otherwise we get sucked into this and essentially most will lose their money at the tops. This is the same thing that happened at the previous tops, the same sort of excitement and euphoria at tops. Now, I'm not saying that this is the final top, and we'll get to that in a moment. The point is you could see the same sort of euphoria happening to Bitcoin as it started to break out in November, December, and then into this peak. And then you get this significant correction, about 30% to the downside. And what happens there is that it scares out everyone who got in late. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people who do get in quite late. Those guys are going to miss out. They're going to get too screwed with their emotions as the markets continue to flip-flop up and down through different sorts of emotions. And so if you find yourself in that camp, try not to get swept up in the emotions. Have a stop in play. Have a look at where this price could get down to, where you would say, I need to get out of the market no matter what so I can sleep at night. Because the worst thing you want to do is just watch this market go down. What happens is you do get these corrections along the way, and everyone gets used to these corrections, and then all of a sudden it corrects more than what you have seen previously. And you're hoping that it goes back up. This was one of the big ones here through April. A lot of people got in at this extreme top and it broke down past previous bottoms. They were hoping that they were going to see an $80,000 Bitcoin. That was the call at the time. It was 80 to 100,000 back in May of 2021. Didn't happen. And then this collapse happened really, really quick. We went live on the channel here for that day there, that really big extreme day down. And there was over 20,000 people watching live here on the channel when my channel was much, much smaller at the time. So everyone was freaked out at that. We had 2 months of nothing and then the build up again for this final peak into the top. And so I bring this part up as well, this 2 months of nothingness. It was basically sideways. People were pretty scared, not sure what was going on at this point until we got that July breakout and the retest here before it started to go a little bit more nuts for that end stage of the cycle. So I want to use that as we get into the left and right translated part of the cycle. Just remember that we had about a 2 month period there where the market was trying to sort out what it wanted to do. Now we've got ETH to get into as well, looking at some of that strength, but let's have a look at this left and right translated cycle thing and what I think is a possibility that happens in this stage of the cycle, especially with everyone thinking that this is going to end a lot earlier. Now, it might seem like it can end. Remember what we're looking at back here at this peak and this pullback. Looking at a peak, who knows where this top comes in? I'm not trying to guess the price. I know a lot of people are trying to do that. I just think it's absolutely a ridiculous idea to do. If you don't recall, or you weren't here in the previous cycle, most were looking for a $300,000 Bitcoin at the next top, that sort of September, October, November period. First, they're looking for 100,000. We got the pullback to 30, and then they're looking for another 10x from that point. It didn't happen. So these price targets destroyed absolutely everyone. So that's another big thing to not get destroyed in these markets. Don't get caught up in any sort of price targets because at the end of the day, they probably won't get hit. And as the market goes up, those price targets get further and further away. They're thinking, well, we're at 100 now. Why can't we go to 200? Why can't we go to 500,000? Why can't we go to 750 or $1 million? It's the same thing that happens on the way down. You know all about those folks who saw the market come to 17 and said, well, it's got to go further. We've got to go to 14 and 12 because where it was last time, it hit this this $12,000 level here, and the market had to go down further. Of course, it didn't. Unfortunately, we know for a fact, a lot of you guys have written in and said you guys were waiting for that lower and lower target, and it never came. And then you missed out to the upside because they were all hoping and expecting a further downside collapse through mid-2023. So I only highlight that because the same thing happens in reverse when we're looking to the upside. On the way down, everyone is angry, they're depressed, and they expect further downside because the feeling of the market is far more depressed. And on the way to the upside, well, everyone gets euphoric, they're in thrill, they believe this thing can go on forever because things like the ETF, because things like the halving coming up and there's going to be less on the market. Therefore, the ETF is going to take even more off the market, which it may do for a shorter period of time. It may just do that and take some off and you see this thing go out. So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, but it doesn't last forever. And if you do see these extreme prices to the upside, that might be your signal to start taking some off the table. I know it's crazy and some are saying it's way too early to be talking about that. It's too early to be taking anything off the table. But remember, if you were back here buying between $15,000 and $25,000, a 3 to 4 times your money is not a bad way to make profits. It's not a bad way to take profits off the table. These are fantastic returns for a spot market, and you don't even have to trade in the stock market or real estate or anything like that. You've got fantastic returns of 400, 500% from these low points, especially with something like Ethereum, which we'll get to in just a moment. And so there's no harm in taking some profits off the table when these markets are going pretty damn hot. It's far easier to sell when the market is going up than when it is going down because this is crypto. It's the wild, wild west. Remember what happened when these markets are going down? We just saw it a few days ago. Coinbase closes their logins. It freezes. They turn them off. Who knows what they do, right? Coinbase freezes, Binance freezes, other exchanges freeze. Your DEXs might freeze as well. It's just the nature of this beast. So it's easier to sell when it's going up. Mentally, it's harder because you think you're going to miss out on all these big gains to the upside. But in terms of getting into your exchanges and making the trades, it's much easier to do when the markets are going up. So always remember that as well. If you have made some significant gains, it's not a bad thing to take some profits in these markets. This is part of the exit plan as well. You need to take profits to pay yourself. If you think it's too early, it depends on your entry. As I said earlier, unfortunately for many people, they get in too late. They're getting in at $50,000, $60,000 Bitcoin, and they hope it goes to $200,000 or $300,000 to make it worth their time. But if you're following a market which is paying dividends now, then I don't think it's ever too early. It can be slightly early, but if you're at these stages where you've done 300, 400, 500%, I don't think that's too early at all. You do you. But I think it's really nice to be able to take some profits from the market, especially when you've put in the time, put in the energy, and now you're starting to get paid off. It feels great to be taking some profits, even if this thing doubles from here. It doesn't matter. You've done fantastically well to that point. And I'll keep coming back to this because at the bottoms, I was saying it's probably a great time to be getting in. You're going to feel that euphoria later, and then you'll be able to take your profits. It's in these times now. It can go further, but it's not a bad thing. That's all I'm saying. So what should we do with those profits? I'm looking at Ethereum right now. Not financial advice. You do your own thing. Go and trade altcoin degenerately. That's absolutely fine. It's up to you. I'm not your financial advisor. What I'm looking at here is the ETH chart. So I put this out nearly a couple of weeks ago now. We talked about it on the channel even prior to that, which you may have been following on. Ethereum still is holding up very, very well against its BTC value and looks like it's trying to form this base right here. Now, this is on the monthly chart, taking a couple of measures from prior all-time highs. You can see back here down to the lows. That was 27 months, top to bottom, 27 months. Now we've seen a top to bottom here, 25 months. And you can see on these closes on the monthly here, they are getting a little higher over time. We've got 25 days to go. It's early days here. But I think once we get above this level, 6 million Satoshis, that is really going to cement its place that the low is in, and you're likely going to see better returns from ETH than you would with Bitcoin at this stage once it gets above that level. Ideally, above 6.8, but of course, that's even further away from where it currently is. Remember, getting in lower at the market, there's always the risk that it falls further because you don't have that confirmation. The reward is, well, you get bigger upside. It's always a balance between risk and reward as a trader or investor. So stay tuned to that. Looking at it on the weekly, we do have some higher lows continuing to form. 4 days to go for this week. man, if we could get a close above 6 million Satoshis for ETH this week, that would be really, really good coming into these upgrades, because you're starting to see, or you potentially would see, a uptrend into these news events, and hopefully you get the close above the prior resistance level after the news event, showing some strength continues into the market. The worst thing would be a push into the news event and then a close under the news event, and then to see the market continue to fall from that point. So there's still some time to get some confirmation of the strength, as I've been pointing out, but then it comes back to risk reward. Do you want to be waiting for higher prices to confirm the risk is lowered, or do you want to try and get some of that reward earlier on, knowing that there is a possibility that the market does fall from that point, or could fall from that point? As we continue on into this last phase of the bull market part of the 18.6 year cycle, because remember there's still the collapse to come, we're still anticipating that prices can go much higher from this point, even if there are corrections along the way. Now, I'm looking at the left and the right hand translated cycle for BTC. And what we're looking at is the possibility of a peak and then a pullback. So there's going to be plenty of options that happen here for the cycle itself. And I don't think anyone really knows where these pullbacks are going to come. The point being is that you want to ensure that you're looking at strength against weakness when these tops come in. And in terms of BTC, as we've looked at previously, should we see a top come in before the halving and a pullback, it's important to note where that pullback becomes bad for Bitcoin and where it's just a healthy correction. And so just as a reminder, we're looking anywhere from around $42,000 to $48,000 as a potential pullback. I'm not saying that it will get there. What we're looking at is above those levels is strength. So maybe it only pulls back into the 50s. That's still strength, even though you would see a 20 or 30% correction, maybe more depending on where this top comes in. That's the point of identifying where the strong part of the support is and where the weaker part of the support is. It's not saying that it will get to that point, as some people think it's going to go to 40. It might not. The point is strength and weakness. And so if that is to occur and we see a few months of holding pattern or maybe reaccumulation before we see it grind higher, then we could potentially expect another higher price, higher than where the previous top comes in, wherever that might be, which could then lead us past the election of 2024 into some other sort of peak that might form after the election, November, December, or maybe the first half of 2025, which would then still be part of a right translated cycle here for BTC. Now, if it did happen earlier, like somewhere late 2024, maybe it's Q4, maybe it's Q1 of 2025, then all that would mean is that you'd have less time to the downside than what many were expecting if it was to top around now, in this first half of 2024. But it would be longer than the previous bear markets. The previous bear markets were roughly around 370-ish days to the downside. So basically that 1 year, you had the 3 years up, the 1 year down. So what could happen is that we see 2 years up and 2 years down. That is still a 4-year cycle. Bottom to bottom, low to low, it's still a 4-year cycle. So at this stage of the cycle, it's important to keep all options open. We still do not know what could happen. The way we keep the options open is understanding where strength lies and where weakness lies once you see the market start to break down. Because what happens to most is that they hold on hoping that something similar will happen to what just happened earlier in that cycle. Your 20%, 30% corrections, they're hoping that that continues again, and they hold into the complacency bounce before the collapse. That is this chart right here, where you see the Euphoria, the crash down, which is bigger than the previous ones, and then there's your complacency bounce before that correction occurs. So keep these notes in your office somewhere, or maybe on your phone, looking at how these markets can unfold across the journey of the 4-year cycle for BTC. It is not the halving cycle where if we did get a peak, then the market had to collapse to that point. It's possible, but it's important not to get fixated on these particular ideas of the market. So congratulations to you guys who have been here since those cycle lows. Maybe you've been following the channel from that point, hitting that like button on every video. Maybe you haven't, but you need to subscribe to the channel right now. If you are taking profits along the way, never feel bad. Forget what the idiots say, it's too early. Typically, when it's too early, it is code for they're getting in too late and they're hoping for higher prices. So forget those guys there. I hope you are doing very well in the markets. And if you are getting in just that little bit late, stay vigilant. Understand where your stops could be in the market as we've gone through with that strength and weakness. Should the markets come down, unfortunately, it's better to take some small loss than a major loss. Just ask the guys from 2021 who held on too long all the way to the bottom, only to find themselves selling out at the low. That feels much worse than taking the loss, which feels bad in the short term until you see the market collapse from that point. Now, I'm not saying it's over. We're still in a major bull. Don't worry too much about that. It's just at these stages now, it's important to be vigilant and looking for those opportunities because you've been making money. Why not? Why not look for the opportunities to get out? If we've been looking here saying that this is a good time to be getting in, well, as we get to these higher prices, maybe up in the hundreds, maybe in the 200s, it's all a good time to be looking to take some profit out. You don't need to sell out all at the one time. Just take a little bit, enjoy the gains, enjoy the video. I'll see you back here at the next one. Take care. Until then, peace out.